I love a bonkers car, but for me, little comes close to lobbing a Yamaha 4.4 litre V8 in the uber sensible Volvo S80. Just listen to this. This and the XC90 were the only Volvos ever to have V8s. Let's find out a bit more. I've spoken before about the importance of having a halo model to lift the rest of the range, and it looks like at this point in time Volvo agreed. This was their answer to the BMW E60, the 550i and the Merc E500. This 4.4 litre V8 was designed by Volvo but produced by Yamaha. It's called a B8 444S. B for benzene, which is Swedish for petrol, 8 for 8-cylinder, 44 for 4.4 litre, the last 4 is for 4-valve, and the S is for suction, which means naturally aspirated. It puts out 315 horsepower, which, even though this is quite a porky car at 1,950 kilos, is good enough for 5.6 seconds 0 to 60. Clearly, it's an engine that had a lot of potential, and indeed, it was also used in the noble M600 Supercar. In that application, it had twin Garrett turbos and produced 650 horses. It's very unusual for a V8 because it has a 60-degree angle between the banks. Now, they did that to make it compact so it could be used in a transverse application like this. Problem is, you have to use a balancer shaft because it's not naturally balanced. Now, in the earlier engines, that caused a few issues, but they resolved that later on. Now, many also think that this is the same engine because Yamaha had made a V8 before this, but that was a development of the Duratec block, whereas this is a clean sheet design by Volvo. One last crazy detail about this V8. In 2010, Volvo pensioned it off after only having used it in 2 cars, this and the XC90. What did Yamaha do? They stroked it to 5.3 litres and made it into a Powerboat engine. Now, just a little bit about the interior because I think these look amazing. Now, that centre console there, which is floating, is just a masterstroke of design. When the interiors are cream, it looks even better because it stands out even more. Now, there were 3 trim levels. SE Sport, that came with adaptive suspension and heated and cooled seats. That suspension system, by the way, is not supposed to be very good. This one is an SE Lux, comes on standard shocks, which is a bit better, and it has little bits of luxuries like the wooden trim, extra parking sensors and so on. There was a top of the range executive, which came apparently with softer leather, extra chrome on the outside, and the premium sort of all singing and dancing sound system, which this car still has as an option. Enough chit chat, let's see how it feels on the road. Now have a good look at this interior, because I think you might be shocked when I tell you it has 149,000 miles on the clock this. You would not say it from anything. I mean, the seats have absolutely tiny minimal wear. The dashboard looks almost new. So you have to say, in these days at least, Volvo was making some really nicely built cars. Some of the contemporary reviews did complain that that center console has a few too many buttons on there, but I don't think that's the case at all. You have temperature for the passenger and yourself, tuning for the radio, and okay, it looks like there's a smattering of buttons there, but most of them are just sort of the radio channels or the phone controls. So for every day, everything you have there seems pretty intuitive. I like the controls where you have the person seated there to direct the air, and you have the little vent. So definitely beats a touchscreen as far as I'm concerned. Now this is a big car. It's almost 5 meters long, 2 meters wide, and yet it really doesn't have much road presence at all. Now I think it's pretty handsome. Now when you're looking at it, you can't fault the lines. I think it looks great. But I think there's a fine line between elegance and anonymity, and this is straddling it quite considerably. So on the whole, I like the way it looks, but perhaps if you're looking for a premium car, it's just a little bit too bland. More importantly though, let's have a feel for how that engine goes down the road. And the answer is very, very well. The brakes actually slightly lacking, I think, for the power that this has, but it is a big, heavy car. And we're going to do another run where I put my foot to the floor even a little bit more abruptly than that, but it goes really well and it sounds awesome. It's just a little bit different from the average V8s. It has maybe a little bit less bass and a little bit more aggression in the sound, and it has plenty of pace. It's got a 6-speed auto. Chris, the owner, was telling me that it was designed specifically for this car. We're not 100% sure if that's the case or not. It certainly is very smooth. When you put your foot down, it does respond reasonably quickly, although obviously not anything like the modern stuff. And so far, do you know what? The handling has surprised me. The steering feels okay. It's got a weird lack of feel off center, which is a little bit off-putting, but once you load it up, it's not too bad. And it's very sure-footed. So it uses the Haldex four-wheel drive system, which has been all over Audis and Volkswagen, like Golfs, all that kind of stuff. So it's not a drivetrain which lends itself well to an enthusiastic driver. It errs more towards usability than driver satisfaction, let's say. So most of the time it's front wheel drive. When it detects that the front wheels are sort of lacking in grip, which will be all the time when I'm putting my foot down here, it will divert to the back as well. But that means that in corners, the balance of the car is a little bit iffy. So when you get close to the limit, it tends to push on the front rather than be quite nice and neutral or rear-endy like a rear-wheel drive would be. But let's just turn it around and do another go through the gears, because that engine, I really love it. It's such a shame it's only been in 3 cars altogether. This, the SUV, where it would be a bit of a waste, and the Noble, where it will feel quite different because it has so much more power. Foot to the floor. Oh, the back end squats, the nose lifts, and the gearbox is keeping it between sort of 5 and 6.5, something like that. It really goes, and as I say, it has its own distinctive sound, which is really alluring. I really like it. I think it's great. Amazing. I'd love to have had this engine in some different cars, maybe some proper sports cars. I know the Noble, but I mean, you know, something a bit more attainable, a bit smaller, a bit less supercar-y. See what it would have done. Let's just push it a little bit on these bends and see how it reacts. An initial turn-in is actually pretty good. There's loads of grip. You can feel the weight of the thing though, and as I said, on corner exit, it just tends to push wide. Gearbox a little bit obstructive when you're in the corners, but not too bad. So it's a big sort of V8, so miles to the gallon is going to be sort of an average of about 23. You could get 25 on the right roads if you're really light-footed in town, more like 15. Volvo prices as well for servicing are pretty much on par with BMW and Mercedes, so there isn't going to be that much difference there. Crazily though, this thing is ULEZ compliant, so that's a bonus for those of you living in London. The normal S80s of this era, they're almost all the diesels. The petrol-driven versions had very high road tax, so if you look now at used prices and everything else, most of them will be the diesels, and that's a little bit of a shame. Thing is, These are just so comfortable. Now the chassis, yes, it is fairly softly sprung, but I think that the comfort is more about the driving position and these seats. These seats are just fantastic. It is such a comfortable place to be. I think most people will be buying this as a mile muncher with an extra added sort of smile factor in it, and in that it is pretty good. We've already mentioned the comfort. To me, it also feels reasonably well isolated from the road. I had read some road tests where they said that road noise and wind noise was excessive. Road noise I can't hear. Wind noise, when I was going a bit quicker, there does seem to be a little bit on the pillars, but it's not too bad. And I really love that they haven't muted the engine. Yeah, if you go on a light throttle, you don't hear it too much, but most of the time you know it's there, and you should do, because you got a lovely big V8. Well, Chris really encouraged me to make the most of it, so let's do another run through the gears. It sounds so muscular, that V8. Traction obviously is brilliant. It feels a little bit like, to me, initially I thought the steering was all right, but I think the faster you go and the less communicative it becomes, which is a trick I haven't experienced in many other cars, but at slower speeds it's all right. Driven faster, it starts to, I don't know, it's weird. It's not bad, it just, yeah, it's just not as good when you're going quick. Now you can change the weight of the steering, but in my experience, when you do that on these systems, it doesn't improve the way it is at all. It just masks it more, if anything. At the moment, it's on the lowest setting. To change it, I'd have to stop the car and restart. I'm just not going to bother. I don't think it would make a huge difference or improve it. The weighing's about right. So for me, this is closer to an Audi or a Merc than a BMW in the way it drives. Been quite impressed today, mainly by that engine, which is an absolute peach. If you're comparing it to the BMWs, an E60 would vastly be more rewarding to drive quickly. It's a much better car in terms of chassis dynamics. But that was the one that was out when this was in 2007, but they were quite cheaply built. The interiors don't feel very nice. There's lots of small little issues with them. And the one that followed up, the F10, I think that came out in 2010. That is a better car all round, really. They'd upgraded the interior on those. It's still better to drive. That is a superior car. The thing about this, though, is, I mean, you know, where are you going to see them? I think in 2020, I had a look. All I could find was that there was 210 left on the road then in the UK. I don't believe that. I've never seen one of these. Production figures aren't available. I'm sure they didn't sell very many, but I'm really glad that they made them. Now, if I've made you want one of these, let's talk prices for a little bit. When I had a look online, I was surprised that I found one for sale, but there is one for sale at the moment, I think with about 99,000 miles, 100,000 miles, and that is up for £5,000. Hard to tell what they should retail for because you won't find another one, but that's about on par, I'd say, with its German rivals. The one that's for sale at the moment has the white interior, the cream interior that I so very much love. I think many of you, most of you perhaps, will like this more standard interior, very classy, darker interior with a lovely wood and everything. But for me, for the full Swedish touch, you have to have the light coloured interior, which I absolutely adore. Thank you so much to Chris for bringing it down. It is much appreciated, and thanks to all of you for watching. I'm going to put a link here to something that is very different. It's one of the original Volvos before they started making boring, safety conscious cars. If you're interested, do click on that. Thank you and see you soon.